it's Platt, and today I show you how to make pulque. So let's go. So gang, I think I have an interesting little project today. We're going to make something called pulque. When I started this channel, I said that I wanted to take you along my adventure through the wonderful world of alcoholic beverages. And one of the things I wanted to do was start making kind of some of the indigenous brews for people all around the world. I've done things like kvass and tapache before. Today we're going to try another one of those, and it's called pulque. It is indigenous to Mexico. Actually, it dates all the way back to the Aztec people, and was consumed across the country pretty much until the Spanish came and kind of repressed it. A lot of people say that pulque is the precursor to tequila and mezcal. Yes and no. There are some technical differences that we'll get into. First and foremost, pulque is a fermented beverage. The other two are distilled beverages. Tequila and mezcal will cook the hearts or the piñas of the agave plant to extract the nectar from it. Pulque uses just the sap from the agave plant. Traditional pulque will come out milky colored, similar to what's in my fermenter. I'm just sanitizing right now. Where regular agave nectar looks, nice amber colored like this. Pulque is traditionally served in what they call pulquerias. They're like, I guess, kind of a precursor to a brew pub. They'll produce the pulque there, they'll serve it in these little bars. Traditionally, just the way they did things in Mexico at the time, men would be in the bar, the women would be out front having little stands to sell snacks to the guys in drinking. Some pulquerias even had walls to divide the men and women. Again, kind of the way things done. Luckily for us today, pulque is making a comeback in Mexico. It had gone through a long time of kind of repression. Again, when the Spanish came in, along with the Catholic Church, they were wanting to kind of get rid of the indigenous brew, that it was, for the pagans or what have you. After Mexico won its independence, though, there were still forces fighting pulque. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, you had a lot of German brewers coming to Mexico, creating their own kind of a Mexican version of their European lagers. They were developing these giant breweries that later became Modelo, Moctezuma, what have you. And of course, they did not want the competition of the indigenous brews. At the same time, you had modernization in the 20th century. Mexico was modernizing, and you started having things like health department and regulatory agencies, and they also really put the screws to the pulquerias, adding all kinds of layers of regulations that these mom and pop places just couldn't really handle. And up until about 10, 15 years ago, pulquerias had kind of died off in Mexico, especially in that central Mexico region, but they're making a comeback, which is kind of cool. Real quick, let's talk about our recipe. We're going to do a standard kind of 1 gallon batch. I have here, I don't have access, and most places in the U.S. would not have access to bulk agave, or agave sap. So what we're going to have here is we're going to actually take agave nectar to make our pulque, kind of an Americanized version. If you do have access to agave plants, so feel free to use the sap. But we're going to use agave nectar. This is 46 ounces, just a couple ounces short of 3 pounds. Anywhere between 2 and 3 pounds per gallon, depending on your, how sweet or how much ABV you want. There are traditionally 2 styles of pulqueria. There's Blanco, which is creamy like this, and then there's one, hopefully I'm saying this right, Chorrados, where it's a flavored, whether it's with fruit, herbs, spices. I think today they're really pushing the envelope. I read an article in my homebrewing magazine about a peanut butter pulque. I thought we were just doing that selling this here. I guess it's all over. But anyway, we're going to make one, we're going to add a little coriander to ours, just kind of add a floral note to that. Because it's a pretty simple brew, I'm going to add a little yeast nutrient. And lastly, I'm going to use a Red Star wine yeast, just a good clean fermenting yeast. You could use like a Safale USO5 beer yeast if you wanted to. Any kind of wine or champagne yeast should do. Well, with that being said, let's make some pulque. Alright gang, so the first thing I did is I've got 1 gallon of water heating up. If you watch any of my videos, anytime you're doing with any kind of sugar or whatever, you want to heat up the water just to make it dissolve easier, especially if you're dealing with thick things like honey, maple syrup, here agave nectar, molasses, liquid malt extract, what have you. So we're going to heat up the water. You can bring it to a boil for sanitation. That's up to you. Are they doing this necessarily in Mexico in the Pulquerias? Probably not, but we are just, make our life easier, which is everything I do around here. Real quick, before I throw in my agave, I'm going to go ahead and add my yeast nutrient and coriander. Now, if you've watched some of my videos in the past, I tend to throw my yeast nutrient in about the same time I throw in the yeast. There is no necessarily right time. You could throw it like if I was, doing a boil for a beer, I could throw it in there. I could throw it in the same time as I throw in the yeast. I could even throw it in post adding the yeast in fermentation. Some people do multiple yeast dosages if you have like a real big beer, like a barley wine or whatever. Really, there's no wrong answer. Like I said, traditionally I've done throwing it in the yeast nutrient at the same time as yeast, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it in here with my agave. Half a teaspoon of yeast nutrient for a gallon is about right. And then I'm going to put in a half a teaspoon of ground coriander. You can use coriander seed. I'm using ground coriander. That's what I've got. I'm already decided that in the future, if I make pulque, I want to maybe do a fruit pulque, maybe a some kind of tropical fruit, maybe mango, maybe pineapple. Any suggestions, please leave them in the comment section. Got those stirred in. And now I'm going to add my agave nectar. Whenever you add anything syrupy like this, you want to make sure you're always stirring. You don't want that sit on the bottom and scorch. Sometimes that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you can't pick up certain flavors, compounds by letting sugar caramelize, but this is not the time and the place for that. Alright, so I'm going to get this all stirred in, and then we'll come back. I'll have my fermenter clean. We'll come back. I'll have the yeast added. We'll do our hydrometer reading, and we'll kind of talk you through the rest of the process. Alright gang, so I let my liquid cool. I went ahead and pitched the yeast. Roughly 2 to 3 grams of yeast per gallon is a good kind of benchmark when doing these things. Did a gravity reading. Came out to 1.076, which means if we let this ferment out completely, we would be close to 10% alcohol by volume. However, we're not going to do that. Pulque tends to be drunk sweet, which means they don't allow the time for yeast to eat through all that sugar. So there's a little residual sweetness left over. To get a little technical on home brewing, the sugars inside something like agave nectar, honey when we make mead, different fruit juices, what have you, in our wine or whatever, those are more complex sugars that take longer for the yeast to break down and consume. Where things like beer, the sugar is maltose that comes from barley, and yeast aggressively attack that. Why am I bringing that up? Well, one of the things you'll notice, like if we do a home brewing kit or whatever, you'll notice within a day or so you'll get a nice kind of head on top of foaming bubbles, and you can tell that, hey, we have a fermentation going. And that fermentation is usually pretty quick. Some of the home brewing kits I reviewed, you have a beer that's drinkable within about 3 to 4 weeks, where again, things like mead, some of the wines I made or whatever, will ferment for months, and it may be close to a year before they're ready to drink. Pulque tends to be drunk young and sweet, so we're not going to let this ferment out Also, too, if within a day or two you don't see a ton of bubbles or kind of a head, or what in homebrewing we refer to as kreuzen, that's fine. As long as you see bubbles rising up, as long as my airlock bubbles, we'll be fine. So the plan from here is we're going to let this ferment for about 2 to 3 weeks. Then I'm going to go ahead and bottle. I'll throw the bottles in the fridge and let them kind of bottle condition in the fridge for about a week, and then we'll be ready to drink. If you want to let them bottle condition at room temperature for maybe a day or two to kind of carbonate it, feel free. But remember, there are still quite a bit of sugar in there. You could potentially create a bottle bomb. Be careful. With that being said, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for videos, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.